Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Nerdy Multiverse and yet another breakdown. Today we will be breaking down and giving our initial thoughts on episode 2 of the second season of The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon. Of course, following Daryl on his journey in France. Now, this season actually has a sort of subtitle to it as well, being The Book of Carol. As now we have both the story of Daryl in France and Carol's story as she journeys there herself. And eventually, those two will once again be intertwined. Anyways though, this episode is titled Moulin Rouge. And pardon my terrible French, but in English, the title means Red Mill. And this episode begins with Laurent as he speaks about how he hopes and wishes that all of his friends and those that he loves and cares about get to be happy and safe. And hopefully, this place, referring to the nest, starts to feel like home soon. Throughout this little monologue here, we get a little bit of a montage of how life is at the nest for Laurent, and how everyone here treats him. He gets fed different food than everybody else, and he is always made to study. After being freed from Madame Genet in the previous episode, Fallou and Emile and Daryl all return to the nest with the others, and are greeted by everybody else. We see Laurent's care for Daryl is super strong, and we see him give Daryl a wood piece of a dog, obviously in representation of dog, which is nice to see, especially after Seven passed away. Anyways though, we then see Laurent praying as he mentions that he hopes that Daryl eventually teaches him how to throw a knife, as Losang is sitting right behind him. It's almost like either Jacinta or Losang are always watching over Laurent. Losang asks Laurent if he wants Daryl to stay there, and of course, he says yes, as he leaves to go visit Daryl once more. Jacinta and Losang watch as the two meet each other outside, and then they discuss Daryl and how Laurent could end up leaving if Daryl ever gets that second ride. It's quite clear that they have their eyes on Daryl and are concerned about his very presence. Now, on the other side of the story, as Carol and Ash are forced to land the plane so that they can find some supplies and replace some parts in the engine. They end up getting attacked by walkers here, but then saved by two new characters, as it is revealed that they have actually landed on Greenland. Now, back at the nest once more as Sylvie takes care of Emile, who is clearly traumatized by what he saw and experienced while he was captured by Madame Genet and Povar. We do learn later in the episode that he was forced to watch as they hurt the others and ran their experiments. We then see what this special thing was that Daryl wanted to teach Laurent, as he teaches him how to play baseball with Isabelle. And just with this scene, we can really see that even though he isn't back at home with everybody else, Daryl just seems so happy. However, this fun does not last very long though, as Laurent is called back. So Isabelle and Daryl talk about everything else and how everything they are doing with Laurent might be a bit too much. Daryl then offers up that when the time does come, when he finally gets that second chance to leave, he invites Isabelle and Laurent both to come back home with him and experience something new and start a new life in America. We then cut to the very next morning, as after Isabelle wakes up and tries to go and see Laurent, she finds his room empty and him missing. as a grapple hook hangs out of his window. Jacinta and a guard come running in and report that two men with tattoos on their faces were seen climbing their walls, obviously framing Povar as the captors. So Daryl takes a group from the nest to go and look for Laurent. Isabelle and Fallou and even Emile join in as well. Now, if you watch closely here, you can see one of these soldiers from the nest hand Daryl his ammo. This is actually important for later on. Back in the Book of Carol and on Greenland, as these two characters, Ooh and Hannah, bring Carol and Ash back to their place. As Ooh brings Ash back to their storage for supplies to repair the plane parts, as Carol and Hannah prepare some food. We learn that these two are all the way out here because they were sent here for climate research for their PhDs. It was supposed to only be for 3 months, but of course, then came the outbreak. But things start to get really strange as Ooh starts talking about kids with Ash and just creepily hugs him, and then Hannah takes Carol's crossbow and then points it at her. She tells Carol that she is supposed to kill her, as we see Ooh wants to keep Ash alive in the hopes of repopulating the human race, as she pulls her gun on Ash. Just super creepy. Carol tells Hannah that she can come with her and Ash on the plane because it is clear that she is not a killer. But Ooh walks in and gets ready to kill Carol herself, which is where Hannah turns the crossbow on her and puts her friend down. Carol and Hannah then leave themselves and make their way to the plane, as Carol did promise that she could come with even now, but Ash shoots Hannah and kills her with a flare gun. You can tell at first that Carol did feel a bit bad after seeing this, but she just moved on and comforted Ash, and then they just took back off after the parts on the plane were put back together. This was one of Ash's first human kills, as he has never really been out in the actual world. But of course, Carol has been out and about a ton, and she has also killed a ton of people. Meanwhile, back in France, Daryl and the group arrive at a red mill, of course being the title of this very episode. As Daryl tracks the footprints to the location, of course, one of his special skills is tracking, and we have seen that throughout the years. Back at the nest, Sylvie starts noticing that something is off, as she sees the same exact meal is being prepared that was brought to Laurent earlier. So she decides to follow after the lady, leading all the way towards the back of the nest, where she ends up finding Laurent being held in a room, but is then met by Losang. All of this was a setup. Laurent was not taken by Povar, he was taken by the nest themselves. And while this happens, the group from the nest end up turning on and betraying Daryl, Fallou, and Isabelle, attempting to kill them. Even Emile is in on it. Unfortunately though, this plan was never going to work against Daryl, especially with him having 2 other allies there with him. Emile is the last left alive, as he reveals that they are going to test Laurent soon and prove that he will not succumb to the bite. So this whole ceremony we have been hearing about from Losang and Jacinta is actually them testing a walker bite on Laurent and trying to prove that he is quote-unquote immune and the cure. Isabelle then puts Emile down as well. As Carol and Ash finally arrive and land in France, Carol tells Ash to stay behind and watch over the plane as she goes out by herself to quote-unquote look for her daughter. She even leaves Daryl's crossbow behind with Ash. So she does clearly mean everything she is telling Ash. Well, at least the point of her actually coming back. Obviously, she is still lying about Sophia though. Carol makes her way through the streets of France where she encounters a truck driven by Povar. She cuts a hole in one of their bags of seeds to track the truck after it leaves. She ends up tracking and finding a crowd of people being given food by Povar. But then they get separated into two groups and two trucks, where Carol also gets taken. Daryl, Isabelle, and Fallou arrive near the nest, but they have to wait for the tide to actually go there. As Fallou walks off to get everything prepared, Daryl and Isabelle stay back. And yes, they end up kissing. I just know a lot of people will be pretty upset with this, especially the Connie and Daryl fans. But anyways, back at the nest itself, Jacinta reveals to Losang that Daryl actually won't be coming back, as she gave their soldiers the orders to get rid of him, as he is getting in the way of their plans. So this whole betrayal wasn't even Losang's plan, and he didn't even really know about it. However, he did know about Laurent, and it is revealed that Losang is the one that has created this entire prophecy of Laurent being immune and being the cure. Now nighttime, as Carol is still on the truck, I believe one of these trucks are being taken to be experimented on and probably turned into more superwalkers, while the others are maybe taken to work for Povar or something. As we then see Madame Genet holding Caudron prisoner and torturing him, trying to get the location of the nest out of him, even though the answer is in the room and on the table, as Caudron's clock sits there with the engraving of the nest, which is where this episode ends off. And overall, I thought this was another pretty good episode for this second season. I enjoyed this episode more than the first one as well. I also really liked all of the action in this one and all of the twists. I was not expecting for the nest to also become villains. I was of course suspicious of Jacinta from the start, but not Losang. So that was a bit shocking, but I am very interested to see where all of this goes. Unfortunately, I do have a feeling a few of these characters, like Isabelle, are going to end up dying soon, which is unfortunate, as all of these new characters like her have been absolutely incredible so far. But anyways, I really enjoyed this one, and I think I would give this episode an 8 or 8.5 out of 10. And I cannot wait for episode 3 next week. But yeah, that about does it for this episode, from me at least. But of course, I would like to hear your thoughts on it as well, so make sure to leave them down below. Anyways though, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed our breakdown and review on this episode, feel free to give it a like, and with that being said, we will see you all the next time that we go through and explore the nerdy multiverse.